Our text declares that we answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Well, there are many people who think the Bible is full of contradictions, but if they came to this text and thought they found one, they would be grossly misled. And so we will see that this is the wisdom of God setting before us a pattern, a way in which he calls us to defend the faith as we proclaim the faith, the gospel. We enter into these verses as ultimately the why of the gospel, which is sometimes described as apologetics, and that evangelism is sometimes described as the what of the faith, and the why of the faith as apologetics. But I find that those two terms, though helpful, are oftentimes so intermingled that we need not worry about, well, am I doing apologetics or I'm doing witnessing? We simply are called to be those who are faithful to defend and proclaim the truth of God's word. That defense is two-pronged. And in some ways, the text reflects that two-prongedness. And one is a defense of the faith, a defense of the faith. And when we think of defending the faith, it's not like God needs to be defended in any way, but we are called to defend the faith. 1 Peter chapter 3, beginning with verse 13. Now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. And so the Lord sets before us this pattern of defending our faith, that we have a reason for the hope that is in us. And so that's kind of a defensive. Why do you do this? Why do you believe that? Why this? Why that? Well, praise God when God gives us an opportunity to defend the faith. But we are not only called to defend the faith, we are called to be offensive as well. Not offensive in terms of not being gentle, not being kind, being kind of in your face, not that, but on the offense. We're not just playing defense, we also have an offense. And 2 Corinthians chapter 10, 3 through 6, sets before us this offensive nature, going on the offensive, going out to talk and to proclaim the truth of the gospel. 2 Corinthians 10 verses 3 through 6 declare this. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. So this offensive and defensive nature of that proclamation. And we do that in the context of speaking to fools. To speaking to fools. It might have been striking to you in the rather stark language of Proverbs 26 and description of a fool, or giving honor to the fool, or trusting a fool. And so we live in a context of being defenders of the faith, and we live in the context of tearing down the strongholds with entering into a discussion, a proclamation of the truth with fools. because the fact is that just as we know this text so well, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, we must also know that all, apart from Christ, are fools. All are fools. Foolishness is universal. It's expressed in different ways, but it is universal. And so, whenever we speak to a non-Christian, we are speaking to a foolish person. Their worldview is foolishness. And the basis of their life is foolishness. And so what our text is telling us is that if we answer a fool according to his folly, the fool will be wise in his own eyes, so we must not answer a fool according to his folly. What that means is we must not enter into the fool's worldview. We must not enter into his belief system to argue the truth of Christ. There's a radical difference between all that we stand upon in the foundation of Christ and the fool who stands upon the foundation of self. And we cannot adopt the fool's worldview when we are seeking to defend the faith or proclaim the truth. We cannot minimize the nature of his foolishness. I recently did a class for homeschoolers in our church. We did 35 hours of focusing on this theme. We won't be here for 35 hours straight. But the heart of that understanding of not entering into the foolishness of the world, we ought to have clearly before us. In Scripture, the word foolishness is a strong word, as we've seen from Proverbs 26. It's a strong word. It doesn't mean that, it was a foolish mistake. And maybe all of us have used the word foolishness in such a way. Oh, that was so foolish. I shouldn't have done that. Now, in the Scripture, this nature of foolishness is one who is in rebellion to God, pride-filled arrogance, self-exaltation, a sinful, destructive lifestyle, and at the heart, a commitment to independentism. I am independent of God, declaring in one way or another that I am above God or I am on par with God. I am self-sufficient. I am autonomous. I am my own man. And that's nothing new to our culture. There was a famous song by a famous singer who declared, "I'll do it my way." It was just as foolish and just as arrogant as anything that is today. It is universal. That nature of universal foolishness is described for us in a text like 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians 1, beginning with verse 18. "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age?" Greeks, the Roman culture was famous for their adoption of Greek culture and all their philosophical strength, which is foolishness. "Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom." Greeks meaning not here the Greek nation, but Greeks in terms of the Greek culture that the Roman Empire had adopted. It's a Greek mindset, a Greek philosophy, a Greek wisdom. The Greeks seek wisdom, and we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. And so, people of God, we ought to have every confidence in the truth of God's word as it's set in opposition to the foolishness of this world. A foolishness that is in total opposition to God and his truth. So there are many different aspects of foolishness. There are different flavors of foolishness. Certainly we know from Psalm 14 verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none who does good. So there's this foolishness. There is no God. And that's utter foolishness. It's just utter foolishness. It's an ultimate declaration of independence. I'm not dependent on God. I am my own. There is no God. And I declare it. I declare it. But atheism, that declaration that there is no God, is just one of many foolisms, various aspects of foolism. So we could go through them. Globalism is foolishness. Humanism, pantheism, materialism, evolutionism, hedonism, feminism, chauvinism, genderism. Any ism apart from Christism and God-centered is all foolishness, and there are a great variety of expressions of these foolishness, and we need to avoid adopting or entering into the fool's world as we seek to proclaim Christ. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. And how do we become like the fool? Well, there are many ways that we can become like the fool. The fool says, I have concluded, after looking at all the scientific evidence, that there is no God. And the Christian, becoming like the fool, says, I have concluded, after looking at all the scientific evidence, that there is a God. Oh, well, that sounds good, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound good? I've looked at all the scientific evidence and I come to a conclusion that there is God. No, that's not good. Why not? Why would that not be good? Well, because the fool says, I look at the evidence. I have the power to determine whether or not the evidence is good or bad. And I determine that it is bad when it comes to thinking a God exists. And then if a Christian adopts that worldview, he says, I have the power to examine the evidence. I can determine if God exists or not, and I declare God exists. Do you see the similarity? The similarity is I. It is the person. I am the ultimate one in control. I am the one who determines whether God exists or not. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that there's no evidence that declares the glory of God. Of course I do. But I know that that is declaring the glory of God. But I know that God exists because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I know it because God said it. I trust God and his word to tell me what it is that I must believe. I don't examine God. God reveals himself to me. And so I need to avoid entering into the fool's worldview and answering him according to his own foolishness. And that's not always easy to make that distinction. But we need to have an absolute confidence in God's word, God's truth revealed. You may not know this, but some decades ago, there were two organizations that were committed to declare the truth of Genesis 1 to the world. And they ultimately were two groups of people, and they ultimately split. And one was called the Creation Research Institute, and one was called Answers in Genesis. And the group that was called Answers in Genesis was committed to, the group that was the Institute of Creation Research was committed that the evidence will prove that God exists. But the Answers in Genesis group said, it's not the evidence that proves God. We believe God exists and we declare it. There's two different approaches to speaking to the fools in our world. And I believe that Answers in Genesis is the best approach. You could see that, for instance, in a book that one of the key apologists in Answers in Genesis, one of the leading astrophysicists, that's astronomers in the world today, his name is Jason Lyle, and he testifies to that approach where we hold to God exists, therefore we see these things, but we don't prove God's existence by the things we see. We marvel at the things we see because God exists. You could see that difference in looking at who God is in one of his books called The Ultimate Truth, which would dive very much into the details of what we're talking about here tonight. But that perspective, that difference, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we believe that the heavens declare the glory of God, and we see it, and we marvel, and we rejoice in that. We also need to recognize that we as God's people do recognize the idolatry of paganism and the foolishness of the fools, false idols, because every one of the isms that we talked about are all false idols. It's a form of idolatry. And we would want to, in every way, avoid that idolatry. And so we want to state clearly these truths. Now, one of the other most popular religions, foolish foundations of our current culture, is what I could describe as genderism. And I know we're all well aware of it. And genderism would say something like this, another example of how we need to be cautious and wise and how we avoid the foolishness of this world. So the person who is committed to genderism says, I identify as a male, even though the doctor's first attempt to identify my gender at birth falsely identified me as a female. And to find my true, authentic self, I know that I'm male, not female. And that's their worldview. That's their foolish declaration. And the Christian, answering like a fool, would say something like this: I identify as a female, which is the same gender that God gave me when that the doctor gave me, not God, that the doctor gave me when I was born. It is foolish for a woman to think she is a man. Now you say, well, that's a really good response. And I would say, no, it's not a good response. Why is that? Because, again, the foundation of the authority is in the self. I identify as a female because I recognize that I'm biologically female. I recognize that. I am that. Whereas the worldview of the genderism person says, I identify as male even though I am biologically female. Well, the problem is we don't identify on what sex we are. We are given that sex by God. We're either male or female. It's what God has given us. We are what we are because God has given us that. And so we must be cautious in those kinds of approaches. So there's oftentimes questions on our new forms for going to the hospital or going to the doctor, and they say, what do you identify with? And I say, I can't even answer the question. To answer the question is to enter the false worldview of the world. It's to be foolish. Can't even answer. I don't identify as male. I am male. And so at the very end, it says other. You don't even do that because you identify as other. So I scratch that out. I can't identify as other because I'm not other. Don't enter into their worldview. Don't act like them. So at the end of it all, do you have any comments? So I comment and say, your survey, your questions are incomprehensible to me. They make no sense to me. I am a MCBG. MCBG. That's not a plus at the end of the LBGQ plus. No, MCBG is totally new. It is male created by God. Male created by God. Not even in the category. It doesn't even fit your categories. It doesn't even fit there. It's a totally different thing. I am male created by God. Or one of the other things that recently came up while I visited the doctor to work on my stiff shoulder was this kind of question on the questionnaire for psychological evaluation. Have you ever thought positively about dying? And the answer is supposed to be no. If you say yes, you're psychologically messed up, right? So you're supposed to say, no, I am psychologically well. So you want to say no. But as a Christian, we say, of course, yes. Yes. I have thought positively about dying. I'm going to go home and be with the Lord. It's gain. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I rejoice in the fact that when I die, I go to be home with the Lord. That's not a bad thought. Do you ever have negative thoughts about your life? Well, I have all kinds of negative thoughts about my life. I sin. And I hate myself when I sin. So I put down, yes. And then I go to the desk, at the lady at the desk, and I said, you know, you can't really answer these questions as a Christian. Did you know that? And she looks at me, right? But what an opportunity to witness. Would that they haul us before the psychologist so we can declare the glories of God. Wouldn't that be great? Here's an opportunity. Take the opportunity. But people of God, we live in a world that is totally foolish. James said that when you follow the path of a fool, that first you have the desire for sin, and then the desire leads to the act of sin, and the act of sin leads to death. And there's no better example than that, than ex-Planned Parenthood speaker at our Christian school in Michigan who declared of this kind of foolishness. She said, Planned Parenthood works diligently to meet with kindergarten students, so by the time they're in the 8th grade, they will trust us more than their parents. Planned Parenthood makes it clear that the individual has the power to determine by their own will if a baby in the womb is a baby or trash. Their worldview declares that a person's choice determines if a baby is a baby or trash. And they make that clear. That people of God, that foolishness leads to death. And it is also something that we as Christians need to constantly set before a foolish-driven world. God creates in his own image. And God knows that we reproduce after our own kind, and a baby in the womb is a baby and human, no matter what a person says. A Christian worldview knows that a baby is never in the womb, is never trash. A baby in the womb of a mother is a person created in God's image. Just like Jesus, when he was incarnate at conception, was Jesus. You shall call his name Jesus. He was incarnate at conception, not at birth. It wasn't a miraculous birth. It was miraculous conception. And so, people of God, do not enter into the worldview of the fool. It's easy to do. I've done it. It's easy to do. We need to be wise. We need to be wise. We need to tear down the worldview of the world. As 2 Corinthians declared at the beginning of this sermon, we need to take every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. That's our goal, knowing that the power in the proclamation is not of us, but it is of God. By showing the foolishness, his foolishness. Now, we could attempt to do that, to show the foolishness of the fool. We can attempt to do that, and we're called to do that. Does that guarantee that the fool will come, oh, I see my foolishness now, and it's so clear, and so let me kind of change my view, right? May not, it may well be part of God's plan and God's purpose for us to do that, and God may be then working his work in the heart of the fool to transform him by grace. We understand that. But we do not want to enter into his foolishness, but we do want to expose his foolishness. And so the text then goes on to say that we can answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. We can show the fool his foolishness, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Now, we may show him that, and he may still think he's wise in his own eyes. This isn't a guarantee that everyone who we show, but every worldview apart from Christ is foolishness. And can be demonstrated so. In the Old Testament, one of my favorite passages is it's actually in the ESV on page 910 in my Isaiah 44 verse 9. Isaiah 44 verse 9, and in a inspired summary of the section that the ESV gives to this section, it says, the folly of idolatry. The foolishness of idolatry. So if we were to encounter, which we would very likely not encounter, someone who has adopted the foolishness of idolatry, of just rampant idolatry, how could we show him his foolishness? How would we show him his foolishness? This is an example in Scripture of the prophets through divine revelation exposing the foolishness of the fool who is an idolater. And it goes like this. We could start with verse 9. All who fashion idols are nothing, and the things they delight in do not profit. Their witnesses neither see nor know, that they may be put to shame. Who fashions a god or casts an idol that is profitable for nothing? Behold, all his companions shall be put to shame, and the craftsmen are only human. Let them all assemble. Let them stand forth. They shall be terrified. They shall be put to shame together. The ironman takes a cutting tool and works it over the coals. He fashions with it hammers and works it with his strong arm. He becomes hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and is faint. The carpenter stretches a line. He marks it out with a pencil. He shapes it in a plane and marks it with a compass. He shapes it into the figure of a man, which the beauty of a man to dwell in a house. He cuts down cedars, or he chooses a cypress tree or an oak, and he lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar, and then rain nourishes it. Then it becomes fuel for a man. He takes a part of it and warms himself. He kindles a fire and breaks bread. Also, he makes a god and worships it. He makes an idol and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over half he eats meat. He roasts it and is satisfied. Also warms himself and says, aha, I am warm. I have seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god, his idol, and falls down to it and worships it. He prays to it and says, deliver me, for you are my God. And the prophet goes, can't you see this is ridiculous? Can't you see the foolishness of this? You plant a tree. You planted a tree. In God's providence, it comes up. You cut the tree down, and with half of it, you go and eat meat. You burn a fire, and you roast yourself, you warm yourself, you make meat, and you eat. And with the other half, you make an idol, and you worship, and you say, this is my God. Now, isn't that foolish? So the prophet is exposing the foolishness of idolatry. And so that is what God has called us to do. He wants us to expose the foolishness of the idolatry of our world. And so, one simple example that I have for that carries on the theme of what one might call evolutionism. But it's the evolutionist says, I have examined all the evidence, and I declare there is no God. Because the only truth that we can find is through science. Science is what gives us truth. And I'm going to base my life on that truth proclamation. This truth. Science is the only thing that can give us truth. So I'm examining this world, and I conclude there is no God. Well, the declaration that says only science can give us truth is not something that science can examine. Do you see it? Only science gives us truth is a religious claim, not a science-based observation of reality. It's not looking and saying, well, what temperature is it? Well, get out the temperature gauge and we can find it's warm, maybe even tending towards hot right now, right? And we can say that and we examine it. Or we can say, but when the scientist says science and the scientific method, whichever method they may think that is the only thing that gives us truth, is itself a non-scientific declaration. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. It is nonsensical, illogical, doesn't follow reason at all. That doesn't mean that the foolish person will be convinced of it, because we must also in every way know that it's not through the defense of the faith, and it is not through tearing down the strongholds of the unbeliever and even exposing their foolishness. It is to know this, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord. The only reason we're not fools is because of the grace of God. The only reason we're not tending towards and rejoicing in the foolish idols of our day is because God in His grace has revealed to us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that the foolishness of God in the cross of Christ is more powerful than all the idols and all the false worldviews of this world. It is to know that God is the one who saves us. And it is the power of the gospel that must accompany. And so in every way, our first goal, if the fool is willing to have us proclaim the truth of the gospel without any defense of the faith, and if the fool is willing to have us proclaim the gospel without showing him his own foolishness, by all means do it. Proclaim the gospel first. Because it's not absolutely necessary to expose the foolishness of the fool. We would want in every way to proclaim the truth of the gospel to them. Because it is the gospel, Romans 1:16, that is the power of God unto salvation, both to Jew and Greek, and to every foolish worldview. It is the power of the gospel. It is the knowing that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so, people of God, though we have a good methodologies, know that one of the key points of the methodology in the proclamation of the gospel to the fool is the proclamation of the gospel first and foremost. That we would have them to come to see and know and rejoice in the truth of Christ. That they would be transformed from fool to believer, to one who has faith, who has the fear of the Lord and looks to Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord and worldview giver. And so, people of God, defend the faith. Don't answer a fool according to his folly. Show him his foolishness. Proclaim the gospel. Amen.
Thank you for watching or listening to our podcast. Belgrade URC is a Bible-believing Reformed confessional church that seeks to cultivate community around our Savior. If you desire to learn more about Christianity, please join us for worship each Sunday at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. If you're not able to attend church, you can tune in to our Sunday live stream through our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our current sermon series and weekly meditation through iTunes or your favorite podcast catcher. If we are not listed on your favorite podcasting host, please let us know through our webpage, urcbelgrade.com. You can also utilize our archive sermon series on our website, urcbelgrade.com. Most of all, we hope to see you sojourning and fellowshipping with us each Sunday. Until we meet again, may the Lord's blessing and peace be upon you.